The auction block groaned under the weight of boots and a single warped plank. Heat shimmered above the packed dirt street, and the sun bore down like a hanging judge. Flies buzzed in lazy circles, drawn to the scent of sweat, dust, and something sharper, blood. The crowd pressed in tight, their hats pulled low, shadows hiding their eyes. Men spat tobacco into the dirt, women clutched shawls tighter, and somewhere in the stillness, a baby wailed, a thin, desperate cry that cut through the murmurs. On the block, the auctioneer's hand gripped a bundle of stained cloth. Lot 7, he barked, voice rough as gravel. He held it up high for all to see. The bundle shifted, and the cry rose higher. The cloth slipped just enough to reveal a small face, red and raw, lips trembling. Newborn girl. Fresh as the day, though not much the day's been kind, he said, his grin slick and wrong. The outlaws who'd brought her stood nearby. 3 of them, leather coats stiff with dust, eyes cold as a winter river. Bid started low, uncertain. A few voices called out numbers, half-hearted, as though hoping someone else would end the matter quick. The auctioneer's chant rose in rhythm, trying to breathe life into a trade no one wanted to see. The baby's cry weakened, turning ragged. The crowd shifted, restless. One man muttered about bad luck. Another swore under his breath. Somewhere near the back, a voice cut through the air, low, steady, and carrying weight. 50. Heads turned. A tall figure stepped forward from the shade of the mercantile's porch. Dust clung to his coat, sun carving deep lines into his face. Elias Boone didn't look at the crowd or at the men who brought the child. His eyes stayed fixed on the bundle in the auctioneer's arms. The auctioneer blinked. $50? Boone nodded once. A ripple moved through the crowd, whispers, sharp and quick. He's gone mad. That's no cattle he's buying. Ain't no good come from talking another man's blood trouble. Do I hear 60? The auctioneer called, almost hopeful. Silence. The outlaws shifted, their stares finding Boone like wolves scenting a challenge. Sold, the auctioneer said finally, the gavel's crack ringing like a gunshot. Boone stepped forward, his boots sinking slightly in the powder-dry dust. He took the child without a word, cradling her against his chest. The warmth of her tiny body bled through the cloth into his hands. The outlaws watched him walk away, their faces carved from stone. One of them spat into the dirt. The wind picked up, sending a swirl of grit around Boone's legs as he crossed the street. Behind him, the auction block stood empty, creaking in the sun. Ahead, the road stretched toward the red hills, heat shimmering in the distance. And in the hush that followed, the whispers chased him, about the rancher who'd bought nothing but trouble, and the reckoning that was sure to follow. The lantern hissed in the corner, throwing long, crooked shadows across the cabin walls. Outside, the wind combed the dry grass in low, restless waves. Somewhere in the dark, a coyote called, its cry sharp against the stillness. Elias Boone sat at the table, cradling the girl in the crook of his arm. Her eyes fluttered beneath the soft lamplight, a thin curl of hair damp against her forehead. The bottle in his hand tilted slowly, warm milk dribbling past her lips. A horse snorted beyond the fence line. Boone's head turned. Through the window, the moonlit pasture lay silver and empty, almost. Just at the far edge, a dark shape sat mounted and still, the wind teasing the tail of a long coat. The rider didn't move, didn't turn away. Boone kept the bottle steady until Mercy's breathing deepened, then set her in the cradle he'd fashioned from an apple crate. The boards creaked as he rose. His hand found the revolver hanging from the wall, the leather worn smooth along the grip. He stepped out into the yard, the dry boards of the porch whispering under his boots. The air smelled of sage and cold dust. Beyond the corral, the rider remained, motionless, horse shifting once, twice. Boone could not see the face beneath the hat brim, only the glint of moonlight on metal at the hip. Got business. Boone's voice carried low but even. No answer. The rider turned slow, horse pivoting in the dirt, and vanished into the black beyond the fence line. Boone stayed there a moment longer, watching the horizon. In the stillness, the ranch felt too quiet, too open. By morning, the wind had dropped, but the unease hadn't. He rode the fence line with Mercy swaddled against his chest, her tiny breaths warm against his shirt. Tracks marked the north pasture, fresh hoof prints cutting deep into the dry earth. They didn't circle back. At the gate, a strip of cloth fluttered from the post, blood red, knotted tight. Boone pulled it free, the fibers rough between his fingers. He folded it once, then tucked it into his coat. Back at the cabin, Mercy stirred as the chair rocked beneath them. Boone's gaze stayed fixed on the distant ridges, his jaw set. The rifle leaned within easy reach by the door. Far off, in the shadowed swell of the land, something moved, too far to name, but enough to know. Boots thudded on the warped boards of the sheriff's porch. The evening light was copper and thick, dust hanging in the air like smoke. Elias Boone stood just outside the office door, hat brim low, Mercy cradled close beneath his coat. Across the street, horses stood lathered and restless, the men atop them armed heavy. Caleb Varick sat in the center saddle, broad-shouldered, his face carved by wind and bad living. His eyes locked on Boone as if measuring the cost. "You've got what's ours," Varick called, his voice flat, traveling clear in the still air. The sheriff stepped between them, one hand resting on the butt of his Colt. "Town's not the place for it, Caleb." "This ain't your concern, lawman," Varick said, the words rolling slow. "We settle our debts how we see fit." Boone shifted his weight, saying nothing. Mercy's tiny hand pressed against his shirt, warm against the chill creeping in with the dusk. "I'll have the girl," Varick continued, "or I'll have blood. Makes no difference which." The street held its breath. A pair of shop doors swung closed. Someone inside the saloon whispered prayer. Boone's gaze rose to meet Varick's. "You'll have neither." A murmur rippled from the gang behind him, spit hitting dust, fingers tightening on grips. The sheriff's voice was low. "Elias, I can't stop this if it turns bad. Not with the men he's got." Boone's answer came without hesitation. "Didn't ask you to." He turned and stepped inside the sheriff's office. The lamplight caught the edge of a long, wrapped bundle leaning against the wall. Boone untied the oilcloth and rolled it back, revealing a revolver whose blued steel had been worn to silver by years of use. Beside it lay a Bowie knife, edged clean and bright. He holstered the Colt, the leather molding to his grip as though it had never been put away. From outside came the sound of hooves shifting, a spur scraping metal. Boone stepped back into the street, the gun low at his side, his coat brushing the dust. "Sun's near down," he said, eyes fixed on Varick. "Come morning, you best be gone." Varick smiled without warmth. "We'll see whose sun sets first." The last of the light bled out of the sky, and the shadows of the gang stretched long across the street toward Boone's boots. Dust boiled up from the canyon floor as the riders came on, their silhouettes cutting hard against the pale dawn. The air was dry enough to sting the throat, the wind carrying the smell of horse, sweat, and gun oil. Elias Boone stood in the narrow mouth of Dry Creek, the fence line behind him, the red rock walls closing in on either side. Mercy was swaddled in the crook of his arm, her face hidden against his chest. Beside him, a deputy held the reins of Boone's mare, eyes darting between the approaching riders and the man beside him. "Take her," Boone said, his voice low. He passed Mercy into the deputy's arms, the weight leaving him like a piece of himself torn away. "Ride hard, keep to the washes." The deputy hesitated, but Boone's gaze brooked no argument. The young man wheeled the mare and vanished into the dust beyond the fence. The first of Varick's men reined up 30 paces out, horses tossing their heads, iron bit rings jangling. Varick sat in the middle, his coat drawn back to show the black grips of his pistols. "Alone," Varick said, almost amused. Boone stepped forward into the open, the wind tugging at the hem of his coat. His hands hung loose at his sides, fingers brushing the worn walnut of the Colt's grip. The storyteller's voice, carried by memory alone, seemed to ride the wind. "They say Elias Boone was once the Widowmaker, quicker than rattlesnake strike, colder than a January river. The kind of man who didn't miss and didn't run." The moment stretched. A hawk circled above, its shadow sliding over the dust. Varick's hand twitched toward his gun. Boone's moved faster. The crack of gunfire tore through the canyon, echo on echo. Men jerked in their saddles, some toppling to the dirt. Horses screamed and reared. Boone's stance never faltered, the revolver bucking in his fist, smoke curling from the muzzle. When the echoes faded, Varick lay face down in the dust, his hat blown clear, a dark stain spreading beneath him. The survivors wheeled away, spurring hard for the open country. Boone slid the Colt back into its holster, the leather swallowing the sound. The wind carried the last of the smoke down the canyon, leaving only the smell of powder and the settling dust. He turned toward the ridge where the deputy had ridden, his steps steady. Somewhere beyond the rock and sage, Mercy waited. They say Boone never drew iron again after that day. But the desert keeps its own kind of memory, and some nights, when the wind cuts sharp through Dry Creek, folks swear they hear 6 shots roll across the stones.